Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're doing something really fascinating, I think. We're kind of comparing two massive figures in media.
Yeah, side by side. One, an absolute global icon, someone who really defined media ownership for a generation.
Oprah, right. And then on the other hand,
You've got this foundational figure in Indian entertainment, Kapil Sharma, who's facing, well, maybe the biggest turning point in his whole career right now. It's this idea of comedy meeting conglomerate, isn't it? And we're asking this huge question that feels high stakes. Can Kapil Sharma, I mean, he's basically the undisputed king of comedy in India. No question about that.
can he actually take all that cultural influence, that huge following, and build a media empire, something truly comparable to what Oprah Winfrey built in terms of, scale, influence, the whole thing?
That's exactly the mission for today's deep dive.
Yeah.
And it really forces you to look past just the celebrity. It's about strategy, a strategic shift.
Right, because the whole Indian entertainment scene is changing so fast, isn't it?
Dramatically. We're right in the middle of this huge shift, really, from traditional TV to streaming to OTT platforms. Everyone's watching differently now.
And Kapil Sharma's been a constant through all that change for, what, over a decade now?
Yeah, his impact has been incredibly consistent. He's got that sharp wit, obviously amazing improv skills. But I think the key thing, the really crucial part, is his instinct.
His feel for what connects.
His unerring instinct for middle-class humor. He just gets it. And that's what's made the Kapil Sharma show, well, our sources call it a national ritual.
That's a great phrase, a national ritual.
And it really is. It cuts across regions, ages, even languages in India. It's this shared cultural moment.
He's like a unifying force, in a way,
Yeah.
in pop culture at least. But you mentioned this choice he faces now.
Yeah, it's a defining moment. Does he stay basically a comedian, a performer who's, reliant on Sony TV or Netflix or whoever hires him?
Renting the stage, so to speak.
Exactly. Or does he try to become something much bigger? An empire builder, like the sources say, an architect of his own media world.
And that's where looking at Oprah comes in. Her story is almost like the blueprint.
It's the essential roadmap for how you institutionalize that kind of personal brand and influence.
So when we talk about Oprah, we're not just talking about a successful talk show host.
Not at all. We're talking about the Harpo model. And that model is all about institutionalizing inspiration, really. Turning that personal connection, that brand trust, into a sustainable, multi-platform business.
She didn't just have a hit show.
No, she built this entire creative and economic engine around her voice. An engine that could produce films, magazines, spin-off shows, documentaries, and ultimately her own network.
OWN.
So if Kapil really wants to make that leap, that huge jump from superstar to, well, mogul, he needs to really study how Oprah did it, the specific steps, the mechanisms of turning a personal brand into a robust, diversified company.
Okay, let's really unpack that blueprint then, because when you look at the scale of what Oprah achieved, especially early on, it kind of sets the bar for the ambition Kapil needs now.
Right, and you have to start with the scale. Context is everything here. As of today, 2025, Oprah Winfrey is, quite rightly, called the Queen of Media. Her entire career is a story of resilience, yes, but also incredible influence.
And that influence goes way beyond just TV shows, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It touches publishing, politics, spirituality, philanthropy. It's vast.
So let's put some numbers on it just so we understand the financial stakes we're comparing here. What's her current scale, roughly?
Her personal net worth is estimated around $3.2 billion,
Wow. Okay.
which puts her in a really rare group, one of the world's richest self-made women, certainly in entertainment. But here's the crucial point. The thing Kapil really needs to absorb.
What's that?
That wealth, that empire, was built fundamentally on ownership.
Not just being famous, not just getting paid appearance fees.
Exactly. It's about retaining the back end, owning the intellectual property, owning the production company. It wasn't primarily built on performance fees or, simple endorsements, which is kind of where a lot of Indian celebrities hit their ceiling.
So that's the strategic leap, from performer to owner.
That's the absolute difference between being a huge superstar, even globally known, and being a true mogul. It hinges on ownership.
And for Oprah, that hinge point was founding Harpo Productions. Let's go back to 1986. What was that move about? What was she really betting on?
Okay, so Harpo Productions. Founded in Chicago, 1986. The name itself is pretty iconic, right? Harpo is Oprah, spelled backward.
Clever.
Yeah, nice little touch. And it's also apparently a nod to a character in The Color Purple, the movie where she made her big acting debut.
Ah, okay.
But the name wasn't the important part. The founding itself was, well, historic. You had a black woman in the mid-'80s taking this massive step to actually own and produce her own show.
Which was unheard of back then, especially in daytime TV.
Completely. The whole television industry, particularly daytime talk shows, was totally dominated, controlled by the big networks they call the shots.
So she essentially decided to break that model. How did she manage that? How did she get the control, the leverage to pull away from the networks so fast?
It really all came down to the rights for her own show, The Oprah Winfrey Show. By 1988, so just 2 years after founding Harpo, they managed to acquire full ownership of the show from the local ABC station in Chicago, WLS-TV.
Okay, so they bought the show itself.
Yes. And crucially, at the same time, they locked in this massive, very lucrative syndication deal with a company called King World Productions. Now, if you step back, that deal, combined with ownership, that's the engine that built the empire.
Okay, explain that a bit more. For listeners maybe not deep in the TV business, what did that syndication deal actually mean in terms of money and control?
Sure. So when a show is syndicated, it means the rights to air it are sold or licensed to lots of individual local TV stations all across the country. It's not exclusive to just one network anymore.
Right, so it could be on the NBC station in one city, the CBS in another.
Exactly. And because Harpo owned the show, they weren't just getting a fee for producing it. They were collecting the huge fees that King World generated by selling the show to all those hundreds of local stations.
Money that used to go straight to the networks.
Precisely. The networks had kept all that syndication revenue before. Oprah, through Harpo, basically said, no, we own the show, we keep that revenue. It turned her show into an absolute cash machine with nationwide reach. And critically, she owned it outright. That move in '88, owning the show and controlling the syndication, that laid the financial foundation for everything that came later, the billions.
Just hearing that detail really highlights the kind of institutional leap Kapil needs to make. It's not just about being popular, it's about controlling the asset.
Exactly. From performer to owner of the means of production, essentially.
And then by 1990, she cemented this with a physical base, Harpo Studios in Chicago.
Yeah, the opening of Harpo Studios in Chicago's West Loop, that wasn't just buying an office. It became the physical heart, the sort of gravitational center for her whole creative operation.
A real production hub.
A massive one. At its peak, that studio complex employed something like over 12,000 people.
Wow, that's huge.
All dedicated to producing content, centered around her brand, her vision. And of course, the Oprah Winfrey Show itself ran for 25 seasons, until 2011. Became the highest-rated daytime show ever. But as you said, the genius wasn't just the talk show. It was the constant drive to diversify.
Right. So what did that diversification look like through the 90s and early 2000s? What else was Harpo doing?
Well, Harpo Productions was pretty relentless in finding new ways to build influence and make money. In 1993, they launched Harpo Films.
Okay, moving into movies and longer TV projects.
Exactly. Focusing on long-form TV and some film projects, they produced some really well-regarded stuff, moving beyond the talk show format.
Yeah.
Things like the movie Beloved in 1998 and TV movies like Their Eyes Were Watching God in 2005.
So that let her tap into the whole Hollywood distribution system, but still keep creative control through Harpo.
Precisely. But, the media landscape changes incredibly fast. And part of building an empire that lasts is knowing when to pivot, even away from something successful.
What do you mean?
Well, by 2013, Harpo actually shut down Harpo Films completely.
Really? Even though it had produced acclaimed work?
Yeah. It was a strategic decision. It signaled that they saw the market shifting away from that traditional made-for-TV movie model, moving more towards long-form series, and obviously the beginnings of the big streaming boom were happening.
So it's about knowing when to cut your losses, or even cut your successes if the future lies elsewhere.
That willingness to shut down ventures, even successful ones that might be becoming outdated, that's absolutely crucial for building something sustainable. You can't be sentimental. She also moved into other areas, co-founding the Oxygen Media cable channel back in 1998.
Which she later sold, right?
Yeah, sold to NBC Universal in 2007. Another smart exit. And then the partnership with Hearst for O, the Oprah magazine. That became a huge publishing success for years before they stopped the regular print edition in 2020.
And she also built brands out of people, didn't she? The spinoffs were huge.
Massive. You think about shows like Dr. Phil or Rachel Ray. Those weren't just random discoveries. They were strategic launches, produced under the Harpo umbrella. She used her platform, her audience's trust, to launch these other personalities into their own lucrative TV franchises.
So the Harpo machine wasn't just diversifying its content, it was diversifying its stars, leveraging that core Oprah brand trust.
Exactly. She'd identify experts, position them perfectly, apply the Harpo production polish, and ensure they got distribution. It was a
Right.
repeatable model. And if you look even broader, today, Harpo Inc., which is the holding company, manages her massive financial portfolio, her real estate, including, interestingly, buying up over 1,000 acres of land in Maui just between 2022 and 2023.
Wow, so she's constantly moving capital into different kinds of assets, not just media properties.
Yeah, diversifying into tangible assets like land. Alongside the media businesses, always thinking about long-term wealth preservation and growth. But okay, the absolute biggest gamble, the move that really tried to scale her brand into a full-blown conglomerate, that had to be launching OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network. Without a doubt. Launching OWN on January 1st, 2011, it took over the channel spot from Discovery Health that was the peak of the ambition.
And it was a partnership initially, right? Not solely her venture.
Right. It started as a 50-50 joint venture with Discovery Communications, which is now part of Warner Bros. Discovery. But making that leap from having a hit syndicated show to owning and running a 247 cable network, well, it turned out to be incredibly difficult, brutal even.
Yeah, it's easy now, looking back at OWN's success, to forget just how rocky that start was. The sources mention it was losing massive amounts of money.
Massive is an understatement. Reports suggest OWN lost a staggering $330 million by 2012.
$330 million.
Yeah.
In just over a year.
Yeah. It was hemorrhaging cash. It genuinely threatened to sink the whole enterprise. Oprah herself said publicly that the pressure was so intense it nearly caused her a nervous breakdown.
Incredible. So it took some serious resilience, personally and financially, to turn that ship around.
Extraordinary resilience. It was really on the brink.
So what was the key? What was the strategic move, the pivot, that finally stopped the bleeding and stabilized OWN after losing all that money?
The absolute game changer, according to pretty much everyone, was the deal she struck in 2012 with Tyler Perry.
Ah, Tyler Perry. Okay.
At that point, Perry was already huge in movies, but he hadn't really established himself in cable television yet. Oprah brought him in, and his scripted shows, especially the haves and the have-nots, delivered huge, consistent ratings.
So he brought the audience. He brought a massive, loyal audience. And that allowed OWN to really find and define its profitable niche. They sharpened the focus. Self-help, spirituality, inspirational stories, family drama, and critically high-quality Black storytelling. Shows like Queen Sugar, Greenleaf, Ayanla, Fix My Life. They built a clear brand identity. So she found a powerful voice, Tyler Perry, whose audience overlapped with but also expanded hers, and they doubled down on serving that specific cultural niche.
Exactly. And that strategy worked incredibly well and surprisingly quickly. OWN became cash flow positive by 2013.
Just a year after the Perry deal, after losing $330 million.
Yes, pulled out of that nosedive in basically 2 years. And by 2015, the network was reaching over 80 million homes in the U.S. It cemented her status as not just a star, but a true institution builder.
And even though the ownership structure has changed now, with Warner Bros., Discovery holding 95%.
Harpo still retains that crucial 5% stake.
Right.
And maybe more importantly, they retain significant influence over the creative direction and the brand identity. She still has a seat at the table.
It's crucial to point out, though, that even someone with Oprah's power and track record isn't immune to the challenges of today's media world, right?
Yeah.
2025 is different.
Absolutely. She's constantly having to adapt. You see her moving much more into streaming production now, doing docuseries for Apple TV+, like The Me You Can't See with Prince Harry.
Because the cable model itself is under threat.
Massively.
Yeah.
The whole cord-cutting phenomenon hits everyone. Just look at the news from July 2025. Charter Communications, a huge cable provider, actually dropped OWN from its Spectrum TV packages.
Wow. So they just took it off their lineup.
Yeah. And they specifically told their customers they could find OWN content over on HBO Max, which is owned by the same parent company, Warner Bros. Discovery. It shows that even an established network like OWN isn't safe from these platform battles and the shift to streaming. No empire is totally secure from technological disruption. And there's another modern challenge highlighted in the sources relevant to Kapil's potential move into news satire, the issue of political transparency. Yeah, that's a really important contemporary lesson here. In 2024, Harpo Productions got caught up in a debate because reports surfaced about a $1 million production fee they received for creating content related to the Harris presidential campaign.
Okay, so they were paid to produce campaign content.
Right, and that immediately kicked off this big public discussion about transparency.
Yeah.
When does a production house linked to a major, trusted media figure cross the line into political advocacy? Even if just a work-for-hire contract, the association raises questions.
So for Kapil, especially if he considers that comedy news idea, the takeaway is that scale brings scrutiny.
Massive scrutiny. Every content decision, especially anything touching politics, will be examined for bias. You have to be incredibly careful about maintaining perceived neutrality if your brand depends on it, like Kapil's does.
So if we boil down the Oprah blueprint for Kapil, it's complex. It's about getting ownership early,
Yeah.
aggressively diversifying, having the stomach to potentially lose big money and bounce back, and constantly adapting to how people consume media, especially making that jump from just being on platforms to owning the platform, owning that digital real estate. Hashtag tag two. The strategic roadmap for Kapil Sharma Studios, Kapil 2.0.
Exactly. That shift from being an employee or a contractor to being an owner,
Yeah.
that's the absolute core challenge Kapil needs to tackle right now.
Because currently he's essentially what? Renting space.
Yeah, he's renting digital space. His incredibly successful show relies on Sony TV or now Netflix for everything: distribution, funding, scheduling, even some creative oversight. That dependence naturally creates limits.
So the goal for Kapil 2.0, as the sources call it, is to flip that script completely. Move from being an employee renting digital space to becoming a creator who owns the digital real estate. And that happens through building his own production house, Kapil Sharma Studios. Okay, let's get into the how. Strategy A is called vertical diversification and consistency, the Pixar meets Oprah model. That sounds ambitious. What does it actually mean in practice?
Well, the Pixar part speaks to quality and maybe appealing across age groups, and the Oprah part speaks to building an institution around a personality. The core problem this strategy tries to solve is how fragmented media consumption is in India today.
Right, you've got kids on YouTube, parents on Netflix or Hotstar, grandparents maybe still watching linear TV.
Exactly, it's all over the place. But Kapil's unique superpower is that he genuinely appeals to the whole family. He brings them together. So this strategy is about creating content that bridges all those different viewing habits.
And the key seems to be moving away from the old model. You know, a new season airs once a week for a few months, then disappears for ages.
Absolutely critical. That stop-start model doesn't work as well in the digital age. The sources talk about creating a daily content pulse.
Okay, a daily content pulse, like new Kapil content every single day.
Yeah, but not necessarily the full show. Think daily, short, bite-sized episodes or clips, content that's designed to be shared easily on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram Reels, maybe even a dedicated Kapil app.
The idea being to stay constantly visible.
Exactly. Keep the brand top of mind all year round. Continuous engagement. That's absolutely essential if you want to build a digital-first media business and monetize it effectively.
I really like this nightly digital hour concept mentioned. It sounds like a very structured way to capture that whole family audience across an evening. How would that work? It's a really clever idea, sequencing the content. It could start, say, around 7:30 p.m., targeting the youngest viewers first. Maybe a short animated cartoon featuring Kapil's voice, using characters from his show, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, hook the kids early, get them familiar with the brand, exactly. Bring the next generation into the Kapil ecosystem. Then, maybe around 8:00 p.m., you pivot to the older kids, teenagers, young adults.
Yeah, a youth-focused improv segment. Something quicker, maybe a bit edgier, dealing with topics relevant to urban Indian youth, workplace humor, dating apps, social media trends, that kind of thing.
Targeting that 1835 group who might not sit down for the main family show right away. Precisely. And then you bring it all home. The main event, the family show, maybe runs from 8:30 to 9:30. It wraps up the evening with what Kapil does best, bringing the whole family together for laughs, music, celebrity chat. So the whole block, from the cartoon to the main show, creates this unified experience under the Kapil brand. That's the idea. And the Pixar meets Oprah comparison makes sense then. Consistent quality, serving multiple demographics, all under one trusted, unifying brand umbrella. It's wholesome, but still smart. But to run something that ambitious, producing daily content across different formats, he can't do it all himself. He needs to build a system like Harpo did.
Absolutely non-negotiable if you want to scale. Kapil Sharma Studios has to become a launch pad for new talent. Maybe create spin-off shows, like a Kapil and Friends, featuring up-and-coming comedians, regional stars, collaborating on sketches or themed segments.
So it feeds the content beast, but also discovers and promotes new voices.
Right. Keeps the main brand fresh, helps manage the massive production load, and builds goodwill in the comedy community.
Hmm.
And beyond that, the studio needs to move into scripted formats, too.
Like actual sitcoms or
Yeah,
dramas.
producing high-quality scripted comedies, maybe family dramas, but infused with his specific kind of humor, something that blends that small-town relatability he's famous for with the more sophisticated production values expected on major OTT platforms. That bridges the gap.
Okay, let's shift to strategy B, the global Kapil franchise. This feels like a really big swing. The sources compare it to K-drama success like Squid Game. Is Indian humor, specifically Kapil's humor, really exportable like that?
Well, the argument is yes, potentially. The core idea is that a lot of Kapil's comedy isn't that dependent on deep linguistic jokes or super specific cultural references that wouldn't travel.
It's more universal.
He relies a lot on physical comedy, on situational irony, his expressive reactions, visual gags, things that translate much more easily across cultures.
Okay, I can see that.
So the thinking is, if South Korea can turn something as culturally specific as Squid Game into a global obsession, why can't India do something similar with comedy? Especially given that India, through Bollywood, already has significant cultural soft power in many parts of the world. There's a receptive audience out there.
So it's not just about putting subtitles on the existing show and hoping for the best. What's the actual localization plan?
No, it has to be much more deliberate. It means investing properly in high-quality, multi-language dubbing, not just subtitles, and targeting specific regions where Indian content already does well.
Where would that be?
Think large parts of Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, even pockets of Latin America, places where Bollywood already has a foothold. You go where the audience is already primed.
And then there's this idea of an international talk show, taking the show on the road, essentially.
Yeah, that's a really high-impact concept. It would probably need a major streaming partner on board a Netflix or an Amazon, someone with that global reach,
And the idea is,
to create a special global capital version of the show, featuring international celebrities as guests, maybe musicians, actors, sports stars, and, critically, recording these special episodes in major hubs of the Indian diaspora.
like London, Dubai, Toronto.
Exactly. Places with large, affluent, culturally engaged Indian populations. It connects him directly with that global diaspora audience, expands his brand internationally, but does it in a way that feels authentic, rooted in those communities. It's like cultural diplomacy, but with jokes.
Okay, now for strategy C. This one feels, wow, potentially explosive. Infotainment merging comedy and news, creating an Indian daily show with Kapil at the center.
It's definitely the most radical idea presented, yeah.
Yeah.
Huge potential upside in terms of impact, but also probably the biggest risks. Using satire, using his comedic style to tackle current affairs, politics, world events, making them accessible.
But India's media landscape is incredibly polarized right now, probably one of the most sensitive environments globally. How could he possibly do news-based comedy without alienating, like, half his audience? His whole brand is built on being universally liked, family-friendly.
That is the absolute tightrope walk, isn't it? The sources suggest the goal isn't necessarily to take political sides. It's more about trying to maybe democratize information. Use humor to simplify complex topics, geopolitics, economic jargon, social debates that often feel overwhelming.
So using laughter as a tool for understanding, not necessarily for partisan point scoring.
That seems to be the aim. Using his particular brand of humor, which is usually rooted in empathy, in the common person's perspective, to make serious issues less intimidating. But yeah, the risk is immense. His current appeal relies heavily on being seen as neutral, apolitical. The moment he steps into satire about current events, even if it's well-intentioned, he becomes a target for politically motivated criticism. He could lose that broad family consensus appeal, which is, frankly, his commercial superpower.
And the potential partners mentioned are fascinatingly diverse. Someone like Kapil Sharma, known for very serious, analytical international news.
Right, on Vantage.
Or, at the other extreme, someone like Arnab Goswami, known for, well, a much more theatrical, high-volume style. Why such different potential collaborators?
I think it shows the flexibility, or maybe the uncertainty, around how such a format could work. Partnering with Kapil Sharma would suggest a show leaning more towards witty analysis, using facts and global context as the basis for the satire.
More like John Oliver, maybe.
Perhaps. Whereas partnering with someone like Goswami, well, that suggests leaning into the performance of Indian news, maybe roasting the style, the polarization itself, the sheer theater of it, rather than just the policies.
So satirizing the news culture, not just the news content.
Could be. The underlying idea seems to be that for this format to work in India, it needs some journalistic credibility, some gravitas, alongside Kapil's comedic talent. The ultimate aim, as the sources put it, is to create a kind of news roast, something that simplifies, engages, and maybe, just maybe, uses laughter to encourage a slightly more civil conversation in a media world that's often incredibly adversarial. A huge if, though. Hashtag tag 3. The economics of the laugh economy and execution hurdles. So underpinning all these strategies, the diversification, the global push, even the risky news idea is one absolute bedrock principle: ownership.
Back to the Oprah lesson.
Always back to Oprah. Just like she built that $3.2 billion fortune because Harpo owned the IP, Kapil absolutely must prioritize owning the intellectual property that comes out of Kapil Sharma Studios.
And when we say IP, that's more than just his name or the show title, right? What specific IP needs to be locked down?
It's got to be comprehensive. We're talking about the rights to specific characters he and his team create, the recurring roles, the archetypes on his show. Those characters have value.
Like Guthie or Palak from the old show, characters people recognize instantly.
Exactly. Those characters, the formats of the shows themselves, because those formats could potentially be licensed internationally, like The Office or Who Wants to Be a Millionaire,
Right.
and all the related content, the shorts, the digital stuff.
If he doesn't own that IP.
Then he's essentially still a hired gun, a contractor selling his services.
Yeah.
But if he owns the IP, that unlocks all the different ways to make money globally.
Okay, like what?
Format licensing, as we said. Merchandise, t-shirts, mugs, toys based on the characters, big live event tours, which are already a massive revenue stream for Indian stars, both in India and in diaspora markets. And then you've got newer things, like potentially NFTs or digital collectibles linked to the show or characters.
And just like Oprah needed Harpo Studios as a physical base, Kapil needs his own digital home base too, not just relying on YouTube or Netflix.
That's a really crucial point in the strategy. If you're only on YouTube or Netflix, you're still basically renting space. You're subject to their algorithms, their ad revenue splits, their rules.
So he needs his own platform.
Ideally, yes. Building an exclusive Kapil Sharma app, or at least a dedicated members-only web portal, a place where he can offer exclusive content, maybe behind-the-scenes access, Q&As with fans, premium virtual stand-up shows, early access to tickets.
And that gives him a direct line to his audience.
Exactly, a direct-to-consumer relationship. That lets him control the data, control the experience, and crucially, control the revenue streams, whether it's subscriptions, direct advertising, or e-commerce, without a platform taking a huge 30, 40, sometimes 50% cut off the top.
Okay, let's talk ambition. What kind of financial scale are we actually looking at if he pulls this off, if Top Hill 2.0 really works?
Well, the underlying economics are actually very favorable. The laugh economy, as we might call it, is generally very profitable.
Comedy costs less to make than big action movies, basically.
Right. Per minute of content. Comedy is often cited as one of the most profitable entertainment genres globally. Production costs are usually lower than high-end drama or sci-fi. You need good writers and performers, but not necessarily massive CGI budgets or expensive location shoots.
And the market he's playing in, the Indian OTT market, is huge and growing fast.
Exploding. Projections suggest India's streaming market alone could be worth somewhere between $13 billion and $15 billion USD by 2030.
13 to 15 billion.
Yeah, so massive. So if Kapil Sharma Studios can execute this diversification strategy effectively, tap into those different revenue streams, the sources estimate that capturing even a relatively small slice of that market, say 2 or 3%,
Just 2 or 3% of the total Indian OTT pie.
could make his company a 2,000 crore powerhouse.
Wow. 2,000 crore rupees. Just for our listeners globally, what does that translate to roughly in US dollars?
At current exchange rates, 2,000 crore is around $240 million USD.
Okay, so we're talking about building a company with a $250 million valuation. That definitely puts him in the mogul category. A significant global content player, comparable to maybe some established mid-size Bollywood studios.
Absolutely. That kind of scale completely changes the game. He moves from being just a very well-paid celebrity to heading a major corporate entity with real clout. And the revenue base would be much more resilient because it's diversified.
Right. Not just relying on TV ratings or Netflix deals.
Exactly. You'd have ad revenue coming in from all that short-form digital content, which can be huge volume, stable subscription income from the exclusive app or portal, big brand sponsorships companies in sectors like FMCG, telecom, automotive. They love Kapil's broad, family-friendly appeal. And then potentially significant income from international syndication, selling those formats in dubbed shows globally.
Okay, that's the dream scenario. Huge potential. But let's pivot to the reality check. Building an empire is way harder than just being famous. What are the biggest hurdles, the main execution challenges he'd face?
The sources highlight three key ones. First, and maybe foremost, is quality control.
Maintaining the standard across all these new ventures.
Precisely. Kapil's brand is built on delivering high-quality, polished, professional entertainment. When you start diversifying, rapidly launching a kids' cartoon, a youth improv show, an international version, maybe scripted series, it becomes incredibly difficult to maintain that same level of quality everywhere.
And audiences online have very little patience.
Zero patience.
Yeah.
In today's saturated media world, if that new youth segment feels a bit off, or the cartoon isn't quite funny enough, or the scripted show feels generic, it doesn't just fail on its own, it can actually dilute and damage the core brand. Mediocrity is poison when you're trying to build an empire. Okay, challenge number one, quality control. Well, what's the second major hurdle? It flows directly from the need to scale. Talent acquisition.
Getting the right people on board to run this bigger operation.
Yeah. Building a conglomerate isn't just about the star. It requires top-tier talent behind the scenes. You need brilliant writers who get serialized comedy, experienced directors, sharp producers, and, maybe most crucially, you need savvy digital strategists, business development executives, legal experts, people who know how to manage global licensing deals, NFT drops, complex partnerships, international distribution.
And that kind of top talent is in high demand.
Extremely high demand. They often gravitate towards the big established Bollywood studios or the global giants like Netflix, Amazon, Disney, who can offer huge resources and global exposure. Kapil needs to build a studio culture and offer incentives, maybe creative freedom, potentially equity that can attract and retain that level of executive and creative talent. It's a major challenge.
All right, quality control, talent acquisition.
Yeah.
What's the third key challenge? This one cuts right to the heart of his success. Authenticity maintenance. Keeping it real, basically.
Essentially, yes. Kapil's deep connection with his audience comes from his perceived authenticity. That relatable middle-class humor, the jokes about everyday struggles, ration cards, auto rickshaw fares, that's his unique magic.
The thing that made him feel like one of them.
Exactly. But as Kapil Sharma Studios grows into this big, potentially $240 million corporation, there's a real danger it could start to feel too polished, too slick, too corporate. If the content starts feeling like it's driven more by brand deals than by genuine observation, or if he seems detached from those everyday roots.
He risks alienating that core audience, the very people who made him famous.
That's the fear. He has to figure out how to scale the business dramatically without losing the soul, the authenticity, that made people fall in love with his humor in the first place. It's a very delicate balancing act.
So how does he realistically bridge that gap between being the beloved performer everyone knows and becoming the CEO, the mogul, who has to manage corporate strategy, finance, global deals? He can't do both full-time.
No, he absolutely can't. This is where strategic mentorship and, importantly, delegation become paramount. He needs to surround himself with seasoned professionals who understand both the creative and the corporate sides of the entertainment business.
People who can handle the nuts and bolts.
Yes, people who can manage the complex finance, the legal frameworks, the operational logistics of running a multi-platform media company. The sources suggest looking towards mentors or partners, like perhaps established film producers. Someone like Farhan Akhtar is mentioned, who has experience across creative and corporate. Or maybe experienced content strategists who really understand the digital ecosystem.
So Kapil's role has to evolve.
Fundamentally, he has to transition from being just the star, the face on screen, to being the visionary leader, maybe the chief creative officer and chairman, setting the overall direction, but trusting a strong executive team to actually build and run the institution day to day. He needs to become the architect, not just the main attraction.
So wrapping this up, what this deep dive really shows is that the path is there. Kapil Sharma absolutely could transform from India's biggest comedian into a global media mogul, but it requires fully embracing that Oprah blueprint.
Yeah. It's about owning the narrative, owning the IP. It's about using his platform to nurture new talent, not just showcase himself. It's about finding smart ways to blend entertainment with maybe deeper themes or information, and crucially, thinking globally from day one.
But it also requires a huge personal shift for him, right? Away from just being the performer.
A fundamental shift.
Yeah.
And a potentially painful one. He has to be willing to take risks, potentially face failures like Oprah did with OWN's launch, and really commit to the hard, often unglamorous work of building an institution, not just starring in a show.
But the potential upside is incredible. That story, the small town guy, famous for jokes about everyday life, becoming India's first true comedic media mogul, building a 2,000 crore company. That's a powerful narrative.
It's a phenomenal narrative, and the timing with India's digital boom feels right.
The real challenge isn't about whether he's funny enough anymore. We know he is. It's about making that deliberate transition, like the sources say, from being laughter's face to becoming laughter's architect.
That's the choice. Does he want to build the platform or just perform on platforms built by others?
Because the world already loves his punchlines. They're everywhere.
They're everywhere. They're shareable. They make people feel good. They're profitable. But maybe what India and perhaps the world needs next isn't just more punchlines, but his platform. A unifying cultural space built on humor and maybe empathy in a media environment that feels increasingly fractured and, frankly, quite toxic sometimes.
So the final thought really is about that potential, not just commercial potential, but maybe even a kind of civic potential.
Exactly. Can laughter institutionalized through a platform like the one Kapil could build actually be a positive force? A force for connection in a disconnected world? That's the really big opportunity, the legacy question he's facing right now.